All right. Welcome back, fellow Bible nerds. Thank you for joining me tonight on another episode of whatever it turns out to be. This one's going to be a little bit different than the other ones. I've had years to put the other presentations together, but the next part of this has recently dawned on me, and I have a ton of stuff on my plate. I'm moving, and I got two toddlers and a hectic life. So I don't have the time to put it into a presentation, but what I've come to understand about this stuff really makes me think I need to push this. Like, God has been making me really feel like I just need to get this out. So for all of you OCD people, I apologize to the ends of the earth. I am not an OCD person, and getting presentations perfect and doing all of the prettifying is not something I'm really good at, and I'm just good at making abstract connections. So, like I've said before, none of this is going to be perfect. I have way too much to do to try and sit down and figure out how to make it perfect, and it'll get better over time. I'm not going to say I'm not going to try, but I'm kind of striking a balance between I've got to get this out here and it's going to take some time to learn how to present it. So I kind of feel like it's better to just start with an abstract conversational tone where I'm just showing you what I have found and what I've seen. Um, and like I said, I'm not trying to be anybody that I am not. I'm just going to talk about the things that God is showing me and present that to you so you can evaluate it. You're all adults. And I know there's some people who learn a lot better from the without all the distractions that I know I have, and that's totally fine. That's why in the military everyone did their thing and everyone did what they were good at. And if you were good at something, great. And if you weren't, just sort of leave it alone and someone else do it. So I'm more of an abstract, loose connections kind of guy than the super perfectionist person, and there's a place for both of those. And honestly, if I had a perfectionist that could help me line all this up and put it into a presentation, it'd be great. But for now, this is what we got. So I apologize to all you people who are biting your fingernails at the horrible unprofessionalness of this. But anyway, where I'm going with this is the last four videos were really dark, really hard to swallow, and just really negative, which I don't like. And I don't want to do what I see most people doing, which is pick one side or the other and go with it, like the Debbie Downer, fire and brimstone people. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket versus everything's fine, everything's hunky dory, and we're all just going to go to heaven and never even feel any difficulty. There's a balance in between of those. So I've hit the this is the bad stuff. This is what we're doing that we shouldn't be doing, and this is why it's important that we don't do it. And I don't want to get stuck on that because at the end of the day, what's important is the reason we look at that stuff is so that we understand how how we've lost the blessing and what the blessing is. And ultimately, receiving the blessing is way more important than not getting the curse. Because everyone is dead set on like, oh my goodness, I'm afraid I'm going to like not like I don't want to get cursed. I want to add laws so that I don't so that I'm safe from all of that. And they keep setting up these walls between them and God, which God specifically says don't add or take away from this law that I have put before you. So there's a balance where I think it's vitally important that we hit the negatives and go, this is what's keeping us from the blessing. But then on the flip side, you have this is the blessing we're missing out on. And instead of looking at what we shouldn't be doing, we should be looking at what we want to get. And it's just like an addiction. If you sit there and focus on the thing that you shouldn't be having, like, oh, I need another cigarette, I need another cigarette, I need another cigarette, it's going to be impossible to break that habit. Instead, you find something else to fixate your emotional energy on, and then you forget about the thing that you're trying to avoid. It's the same thing with all of this. So instead of focusing on what we're trying to avoid, let's focus on the blessing we're trying to get. And so that's my intro. I thought that I had chat available on here, but it doesn't seem to be showing. Again, I'm new to all of this. I apologize, but we are live, so my computer says. So we will just keep going and figure it out later. So let's see. There's the bad stuff. So I want to start with Jeremiah 31. We're discussing the new covenant. That's what all of this is about. The old covenant is done, it's burned down, it's destroyed, and all of the scriptures is built around, especially the New Testament, the reabsorption of Israel under the new covenant, because the 10 tribes were dispersed into the nations because of their abolishment of the old covenant, and God finally divorced them in Isaiah and Hosea when he sold them to the foreign gods. And now that we've kind of been through the basics of those foreign gods and what they were actually doing to reinforce and prove that marriage to these deities, they essentially earned their punishment, and it continually got worse because they weren't listening to God when he said, you're getting yourself in trouble here. And it was back on the ship at probably about 2018, and I was in the galley eating lunch one time, and I just had been reading Jeremiah, and I was asking myself, in Jeremiah 31 through 34, we go over the new covenant and what the covenant entails. And I asked myself, okay, well, I know Yeshua came and he literally said, this is the cup of the blood of the covenant, which is written in my blood. And he's referring to this concept, this passage in Jeremiah, which is the new covenant laid out. And I'll read it real quick, but it bugged me for years that Yeshua said, I'm here with the blood of the covenant to confirm the blood of the covenant, but when you read this covenant, none of these signs have fallen in place yet. So there's some kind of a disconnect. And that bugged me for forever, and I think I've finally come to understand that. So anyway, essentially he starts it with, at this point, everyone will die for their own sin. They're not going to die for their father's sins anymore. They're going to die for their own sins. And he goes, behold, the days come, says Yah, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand. Sorry, I distracted myself. To bring them out of the land of Egypt, which covenant of mine they broke, although I was a husband to them, says Yah. But this is a covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yah. I will put my laws in their inward parts, and I will write it in their heart. I will be their God, and they will be my people. They will no longer teach his neighbor, and every man teach his brother, saying, Know Yah, for they all will know me. From their least to their greatest, says Yah, for I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sins no more. Okay, specifically where it says, no one will have to teach his brother, know the Lord. Every man will know him. Okay, that definitively hasn't happened. And I can also say definitively, he has not put his laws in our inward parts yet. Because everyone is constantly bickering over everything that's not important, and these tiny little religious elements when the law is all about how you treat people. The laws he's trying to put people in, that he's trying to put in our hearts, is one, getting the idols out of our life, and two, treating people with human dignity and respect, which I don't see in any religion as a major focal point anymore. Which I will say Christianity has had that down pat, but as this new generation, at least in the American church, of churches has developed where they've turned into businesses, this concept of treating people with respect has more become an element of show and what they want people to perceive they treat people as. But I digress. I'm getting off topic. Where was I? So yeah. Anyway, the laws we we as a people do not drive ourselves to know and understand and um, follow God's laws, no matter how you put it. Like uh, it's apparent if you desperately want to understand God's laws or if you're looking for every out. And as a whole, humanity to this day is still dead set on doing everything they want in life and avoiding the laws of the Bible and replacing them for whatever laws they think are more important. And like the major proving one, I'm sorry, I'm really uh, getting circling back here, but we still have to teach each other about God. That's the whole point of the Christian missionaries going to all of these foreign nations all over the world, making disciples, is the fact that everyone doesn't know who He is yet. So that, in effect, shows we're not there yet in its fullness. So that was a really long explanation that shouldn't have taken that long. But like I said, this live video thing is new to me. So bear with me as I figure out how to talk to an empty void of camera. With no feedback, I was really hoping to have my chat box, but I don't know how to set that up. So I'm going to have to screw with that at some point in the future. So continuing on, this whole thing, we're 10 minutes in and I haven't even talked about where I want to start. Um, this whole thing is all about we as Israel, we God's people, whether it's Christian, Jew, Hebrew roots, Torah keeper, um, any religion known to man, we have all, as a whole, lost the whole point of religion. And we've lost the covenant because we have just intertwined with everything. Um, the book of Hosea, sorry, Hosea 7 specifically is talking about Ephraim. And Ephraim is like, this should say Ephraim. They changed this in the NIV. Doggone it. This is why I like the World English Bible. It's not the best translation, but it actually has a fairly interlinear style. Um, you can get over the incidentals. Anyway, there we go. Good old NIV, always messing up the Bible. Love you guys. So, Ephraim, he mixes himself among the nations. He is a cake not turned over. Crazy, especially after you understand this pagan marriage of the foreign gods. That makes a lot more sense. The intermixing and the yeast of the Pharisees, um, the intertwining of ourselves with these foreign deities, where like you can't even eat it. It's just like a doughy mess. But it's because of that mixing. So we as a people, all of God's people, have become out of covenant, and that is proven by the fact that all of the curses that God placed on his people would fall on them if they didn't keep the covenant. So we entered into the covenant, and we all said, yes, we'll do everything you say, and then we all intermarried with all the nations, and we ended up getting the curses of the covenant. And that's the whole point of Yeshua. But the principle that lies here is Yeshua came to lay out a framework for a new covenant, but what I've come to understand is that framework has to be entered into consciously and consistently, and I'll prove that out as it was in the book of Ruth, as I mentioned in the end of my last video, where it kind of clicked and it all made sense and started to connect. So I'm just gonna go into the major points of the book here. And yes, I am drinking a beer. Sorry if that offends you. Uh, by the way, that wasn't meant to sound rude. I'm just not used to talking live. So we'll move on here. Okay, so the book of Ruth, when you start to read the meanings of different concepts and the images of when you've been through the prophetic books where you talk about like Revelation and you've got the horns and the trumpets and the bowls and the stars and the keys and the crowns and the heads, like you start to realize that the Bible, and Yeshua did this too, where he's constantly telling parables with these specific images that mean something, and everyone typically finds one meaning, and then they all talk about that one meaning. So, but when you actually dig into, you take those prophetic meanings of every item, and you go and you find the other scriptures that refer to that item and that thing, it weaves this tapestry together. And I don't want you to take my word for it. I'm showing you what a good friend of mine, Scott, showed me. Like I always knew it to a minor degree, but I had no idea how you could literally read any single story in the entire Bible. And every single one of them is weaving a story with these pictures that are um, prophetic storytellers in the spiritual realm. It's hard to describe sometimes, but I'll just have to show you. So anyway, um, in the book of Ruth, the beginning's always important because it's your codex, right? It gives you your basic concepts that are going to be in play. And um, Paleo Hebrew was it was a pictographic language. So all 26 letters, Aleph through Tav, had a picture, and those pictures were associated differently to paint different pictures of concepts and principles. And that general basic concept still applies, but the problem is in English when we read it, we lose a lot of that conceptualization, and we have to actually go back to the Hebrew words and what those mean to plug it back into the story, because we understand the story in our Western mind, and the Hebrew and the definitions and the meanings are hidden because when we read it, we just go, okay, Ruth, Bethlehem, Judah, Moab. We read right over that. Like I know, I've done it my entire life. You just go, okay, like unimportant stuff, details, cool. Let's read the story. But these details are where everything is framed for you. So to to show you what I'm talking about, let's just go down the line. To start, we've got a man from Bethlehem. What does Bethlehem mean? Bethlehem, house of bread or house of war. Um, and I haven't really dug into the house of war side of this, so that's going to be a whole nother ballpark. But the house of bread, I'm sure most of you know Jesus, Yeshua, is from Bethlehem, the house of bread. He's the bread of life. We all know that basic concept, that basic element of it. but it goes so much deeper than most of us even realize. For instance, so they're in Bethlehem. So our framework has been set within Bethlehem. What is Bethlehem? It's in Judah, but also in Ephraim. So there's a little bit of an overlap there. Um, so anyway, a man from Judah went to live in the country of Moab. As we all know, this is an instant no-no. What does Moab mean? Okay, so your basic meaning from I love this Abarim website. They are the bomb for interpretations and understanding biblical connections. They go through the reference points. They go through the verbs that construct each word. And Hebraically, it's like a building block. So each verb, each concept, each noun that is used in a word compiles itself into a larger definition. So Moav is who is your father or the water of a father. And now that we've kind of hit the baseline of the Adam and Eve concept, Yeshua was the second Adam, and Adam was the first Adam. I know I'm a genius for pointing that out. Um, we've got one Adam and two Adams. Which one is our father? And Yeshua, when he was fighting with the Pharisees, he would say, if you were the sons of my father, you would know me because I'm the son of my father and you're the son of a different father. So clearly you're a pit of vipers. It's like, all right, you're not my fathers, so you're the other fathers. There's only two. There's it, Babylon likes to muck it up with there's hundreds and thousands of gods and they're all over the place and when you really boil it down and you follow it back to the roots, it's the tree of life and it's the tree of knowledge. Yeshua is the tree of life and this other Adam is the tree of knowledge. So Moab refers to who do you serve, who's your father, but it also refers to, let's see, sifting. I'm trying to find that point on the page. Where is the sifting element? It's probably in here and I'm missing it. It may have been another site where I was putting that together, but anyway, the question vaguely asks like which side are you on, which father do you serve? So, but there is a more in-depth principle where it's referring to that sifting of the, are you clean or unclean? Are you holy or unholy? Are you the devils or are you gods? And that's a recurring theme all through the Bible that whose father um, who is your father? So anyway, we've got Moab. It refers to the sifting. We've got a man from Judah, which means praise. Bethlehem, house of bread. Um, and obviously we know Judah is referring to the rulership, the kingship of Israel, which is where Yeshua comes from. And his wife and his two sons moved to Moab. The name of the man was Elimelech, which means God is king. Got no problems with that. So you're the father. This is the father in this instance. He's painting the prophetic picture of God the Father. And he is clearly the king. No issues. All right. So the father of this family, who initially was God as king, went to Moab, and his sons married Moabite women, which again, intermarrying with the pagan nations, Israel was supposed to be this holy nation that was not intermarrying with the foreign religions. The marrying the foreign women is not a problem physically; it's a problem spiritually. That's always how it's been. Rahab was a Canaanite, but she became an Israelite because she left her foreign gods and became an Israelite. The blood was never a problem. It was the fact that when they married these women, they married the religions of the women. And so they were drawn into those religions which God was trying to avoid. So that's a major center point here. It's not about the people in these nations, it's about the religions that they're adhering to. So the name of his wife was Naomi. And let's see, where is Naomi? She's hiding over here. Sweet, my delight. Okay. This should start to make some connections with Revelation and Daniel, where he ate the scroll that was sweet but turned bitter in his mouth, because later, after her sons died, um, when she went back, I'm trying not to bounce around too much and confuse you. So I'm on a thought now, so I'm just gonna roll with it. If we can move to, I'm frozen. Oh, this is a crapshoot. There we go. All right. No, it was at the end of that chapter. I am sorry. So she says, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara," which means bitter. So I don't think that. Yeah, there we go. Let's go to Abarim. Bitter or strong. So this is referring to the bitterness of slavery in Egypt. It's referring to the bitterness of the curse. It's referring to the bitterness of death. It's all intertwined. So she goes from sweet, being married to Elimelech, to after their sons died, because they married into the foreign nations, she became bitter. She became slavery. She became death, in essence, and she lost her vigor. So, and we'll prove this concept where Machlon and Kilion, these men are the men who married Ruth and Orpah. Machlon means sickness, essentially, and Kilion means death, coming to an end. So this is a story of Adam and Eve. We're seeing the the father is married to Naomi, she is the covenant that God married Israel with, and then when the sons of that covenant married foreign nations, they died, and then the father died with them, and Naomi, who is that covenant who has been left in the dark, um, turns bitter. She turns sour. And that's the reference of the scroll in Revelation 5. And in Daniel chapter 7, check me on that. I may be way off. Anyway, Daniel had the same thing happen. So, because they took Moabites. Now, Orpah, her name means submitted, specifically. Drip, cloud, bent neck. It's a reference of falling, um, submission. And Ruth means friend, associate. This is referring to the prophets. It's referring to the saints, the elect. Um, Basically, anyone who takes on the covenant. And this is proven out where Ruth, after the men die, Naomi decides to go back to her homeland, and Ruth and Orpah follow her. Naomi dissuades Orpah, and Orpah goes home and submits back to her Moabite gods. And Ruth says, "No, I'm going to follow you wherever you go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." Um, and she essentially marries herself to the covenant of Israel. So Naomi returns in bitterness. She has nothing left. She left full, and she came again empty. And this is definitively referring to the curse that Israel and Judah fell under because of our lack of adherence to the covenant that we drew ourselves into. So this is a major point here where you had the context set with the place, referring to it was Judah and Bethlehem and Moab at play. So we're talking about the sifting of the people, sifting of the covenants. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So the barley harvest is a clear prophetic depiction of the Passover and the drawing in of the first fruits. It's the specifically also about Ephraim. Ephraim is depicted as that barley loaf. It was in the book of Judges when Gideon had his dream. Gideon was a Benjamite or and an Ephraimite. Benjamite, Ephraimite overlap as well. Um, he was an Ephraimite, and when he was afraid to attack the Midianite camp, the dream he heard was that a barley loaf rolled down the hill into the camp and turned over the tents. So the reference of there's other references, but I'll let you run with that and um, do some research because it's all over the Bible. But barley refers to the gleaning and the harvesting of Ephraim and bringing Ephraim back in. So when they come back to the land, it's as the barley harvest is happening. So Orpah's already been sifted back into the Moabites, and Ruth has now been brought into the covenant of Israel. And notice, she is the Moabite, she is the pagan wife of the dead Hebrew man. And that's vitally important because what we're talking about is we're tracking the birthright, we're tracking the covenant and the inheritance because the man that died had land in Israel and he had an inheritance in Israel, but that land was now sitting empty and wild and uninherited. So Ruth didn't have any ownership or right to that land except by marriage. And when you conceptualize and add in what we were talking about in the older, um, sorry, in the previous videos, that marriage right is all about what you're inheriting. If you're marrying death, you're inheriting whatever it gets. And if you're marrying life, you inherit life and you get whatever life gets. So these gods that are devoted and set to burning and set to destruction, if you marry those gods, you get destroyed as well. And that's why God keeps warning us and saying, don't marry these gods. Don't pick them up, don't touch them, don't put them in your house, don't look at them because they're going to get burned up. I'm not telling you that because I'm mad or mean. I'm telling you that because I'm going to burn them up and I don't want to burn you up too. So marry life instead. Let's see. So Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, God is king. And his name was Boaz. If you remember, Boaz or Boaz was one of the pillars of the temple that Solomon built. Oh, that's not Boaz, that's Moab. Strength by strength. It's a pillar. It's strong. It's um, powerful. Fierceness. But I think it's really potent when you connect these dots and go, okay, so Ruth's first husband was Machlon, which means sickness, and her second husband was strength. I mean, you can put together hundreds of verses that parallel that. So these meanings are already proving themselves. And like I challenge you guys, Look at this isn't something that just I can do. This is something all of any of you can do. You can look at anything that you've been reading, look at the names, the definitions of the places and the people. Find out what those pictures represent, and you will be blown away by what that story is telling you. It's this is knowledge that the religions have hidden from us, but it's been in plain sight this whole time. So again, um, this is the first Adam and the second Adam. The the religion of Adam and the religion of Yeshua. So Ruth said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I find favor." So before we get too far off track, I have to hit the major points of this gleaning concept because this is not a Western way of thinking. It's not a Western law. It's not a Western rule. So we just go, what are you even talking about? Um, Yeshua mentioned this verse, "You shall not muzzle the ox when he treads out the grain." And he said, surely that wasn't given for animals, but for you. Meaning, when someone's working for you, you're not going to not feed them while they do your work, right? But it also goes deeper. So you have, hold on, I think this might be the wrong chapter. I meant to go to, which one is gleaning? I may just have to, it's not this chapter. I had it pulled up and I think I lost it. So, anyway, there is a law specifically that says when you are harvesting your field, you are not allowed to go back over and pick up all the pieces that fell. You're supposed to leave those for the poor and the widows and the orphans who are hungry, who don't have a field of their own. So when you're harvesting your wheat and you drop a piece, the poor are going to come and pick that up, and you're not supposed to send people back and pick it clean. Same goes with the edges of your field. Whenever you have a field, you're supposed to glean or you're supposed to harvest, and around the very edges, that also is for the poor, and that's just part of the way that the biblical society was meant to protect and take care of the weak and the poor, and not just give them handouts, but give them the ability and the option to feed themselves if they were willing to go and do the work. So it's actually a really fantastic system. But I don't remember what chapter that was in, so I'm just going to move on. She's gleaning in this field because she's poor. They have nothing. They haven't been able to plant because all the men are dead, even though um, the land of the inheritance is in Naomi's possession. They just don't have anyone to work it for them. Or they got there and it hadn't been worked, so it's just an empty field. So major points. I'm trying to make this as brief as possible because I can go on wild goose chases. So Boaz notices Ruth. Um, she said, "Please let me gather the after the reapers." So she's going and picking up the extra. This also shows that Boaz is a righteous man who's keeping the law because he's actually instructing his servants to to harvest and glean in the proper biblical manner. So that's also an important point. He says, "Don't glean in another field. Stay close to my maidens." His men aren't allowed to touch her. "If you're thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from that which the young men have drawn." Now that has all kinds of references to Yeshua. He who drinks from me will not be thirsty. We'll get into those later, but it's all this constant the water drawn by the master continuously comes up. And she doesn't know why he's taken favor on her. He says, "No, I know who you are. I've heard what you did for your mother. I've heard how you left your pagan gods and your foreign um, people to come to Israel, and I respect that. So you do you." That's a quote. by the way. Uh, so, ooh, this, I'm not going to dig into this now, but ooh, that has so much prophetic significance. Dip your morsel in the vinegar. They passed her parched grain. She ate, was satisfied, and saved some of it. Um, and then he tells his servants to actually pull sheaves out of the bundles so that she can get extra. And she got so much that Naomi was surprised, blah, blah, blah. So Naomi knows what's going on, and she's watching, and she goes, okay, stay in his field. I see why you got so much. Let's keep feeling this out. So then Naomi tells her the plan. Um, she clearly sees that Ruth likes Boaz, and she sees that Boaz is giving her extra favor because of how much she brought back. So go to the threshing floor. It's the end of the harvest now. Don't let anybody see you until he's finished eating and drinking. Okay, so this is an important point to make because, again, we're talking about the barley harvest. We're talking about the spring, um, the spring harvest, and now we're talking about the end of the harvest on the threshing floor, where he's done eating and drinking. This is referring to Passover again. So Boaz is a picture of Yeshua here. He's the picture of the man who's redeeming the dead man's wife. And Naomi gives her a specific list of instructions of what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And um, the reason for these set of instructions is specifically um, in this translation, it doesn't capture it well, but she's basically saying, I'm trying to secure your future. And so that shows where she asks him, spread the corner of your garment over your servant, for you are a near kinsman. Now, again, in our doggone it. In our Western mindset, we read this and we're like, huh? Doesn't make any sense. This, again, is so incredibly prophetic and referring to Yeshua and his salvation of the world. It's wild. So the sin of Adam was he immediately fell and intermarried, or Eve intermarried with Satan, who was, and then Adam followed her into that spiritual um, marriage. And from then on, none of Adam's seed was perfect, and God was asking and looking for pure, perfect offspring. And he didn't get any holy offspring except ones and twos here and there until Yeshua came. And Yeshua was that perfect offspring um, that the devil kept trying to avoid and keep from happening by slaughtering and causing mayhem. Where was I going with that? Okay, so it's a threshing floor. It's the barley harvest. It's bringing in of the seed. And she says, spread your garment over me, for you're a near kinsman. This concept of the kinsman is um, wildly non-American. So to explain the prophetic nature of this, again, this isn't referring to, this isn't, what's the, okay, so I'll just go over the verse and explain myself from there. So if brothers dwell together and one of the men dies and he has no son, the wife of the this, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. Yeah, I know this sounds weird and barbaric, but listen to how this is meant to be playing out in a spiritual sense. It shall be that the firstborn whom she bears shall succeed the name of the brother who is dead, that his name not be blotted out of Israel. So this is really important here. The name of the family lineage is huge because the inheritance of each family was passed down through the bloodline. And if a man died and had no son, your bloodline is cut off. There's nothing you can do anymore. Your inheritance is just sitting there floating in thin air. And that's what the enemy is capitalizing on right now, which we'll get into. But this concept, now looking at how barbaric this concept sounds in our Western worldview, it was not it wasn't this something where the man could just go to this woman and be like, "Hey, by the way, I'm your husband's brother, so let's go make a baby." No, look at the story. It was Ruth's decision where Naomi said, "Hey, I recommend that you ask Boaz, who's a potential kinsman redeemer, to redeem you as the kinsman." It was not the man going to this woman and being like, "Okay, this is the law. I'm going to take you as my wife now." It was this woman realized that she had an empty field and she had no husband left, and Ruth had no husband, or Naomi had no husband left, and she had no sons left, and their line died with them. And this was the only way to take that family inheritance and pass it on and keep the bloodline going. And if all of you other Bible nerds will know, like, this is Yeshua's lineage. Like, it was vitally important that this family line continued because this is where the shoot of Jesse comes from. This is like massively prophetic and massively important. And so that's a major point here. This bloodline could not die. This inheritance could not just fizzle out and go to nothing because that's what the enemy was. He was trying to kill everybody off, specifically by getting them to marry the nations, so that the inheritance was left to who? Him. He was given the earth. He was given all the inheritance unless it was claimed by somebody. So what we have here is Naomi going to Ruth and saying, "Okay, here's a plan. When I die, my land goes to nobody, and now it's just floating there. But because you were married to a Hebrew man, you have the right to get another Hebrew man to come and make an offspring for that Hebrew man to carry on the lineage and keep that inheritance moving forward." And this is where it gets unbelievably prophetic. Like, just like wait as this thing unravels. Like when I first saw this, it absolutely blew my mind. So Naomi tells Ruth what to do. She tells her when to do it and how to do it, and Ruth follows it to a T. When he had eaten and drunk, his heart was merry. He went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. So the grain has been collected into the barn. There's some parables connecting to this. I'm just going to throw that out there. We can dig into those later. If you guys throw comments out there, I'll once I get this figured out better, I'll be able to actually kind of have more of a conversation. And if I'm getting off track, you can comment and ask specific questions so that if I'm not making myself clear on something, it'll make more sense. But we'll get all the kinks figured out anyway. Um, This is huge. She uncovered his feet and lay down. Now, I have looked at every single resource under the sun trying to figure out what does this mean? Why did she uncover his feet? And nobody knows. Like nobody gets it. Everyone has like a reason, and I have looked at hundreds of explanations, and none of them had made sense. And I've this has bothered me for years. I've read this for years and gone, why on earth does it specifically say she uncovers his feet? What are we referencing here? I don't have this pulled up, but it is important, so I'm going to Google it. Um, okay, in Joshua and in Deuteronomy, we have it happens earlier in Genesis when Abraham gets this. Um, but in Deuteronomy, it's reiterated to the people of Abraham, where every place where the sole of your foot treads will be yours. Your territory will extend from the wilderness of Lebanon and from the Euphrates River to the western sea. Abraham was promised, walk the width and breadth of this land because I'm giving it to you. And wherever the sole of your foot, wherever your sandal lands, that will be your land. And I'll give it to your inheritance. And then that's reiterated to Israel. And then in the greater Exodus, on the resurgence and the bringing back of God's people, he also tells them, he tells all of us, like in our day, as you're coming back to these ancient traditions, as you're coming back to the land, as you're coming back to the Torah, and as you're coming back to my ways, going to give you every single place that your soul treads as well. So it's an expanding covenant where initially Abraham was given a small patch, and then his descendants were given a small patch, and then even through our disobedience, where we didn't obey and we were scattered to the nations, God said, "Yeah, that blessing that everywhere that your foot treads will be yours." That's still in effect. So even when God disperses us and kicks us out into all the nations, He still uses that to bless us and add it to our inheritance. Which I don't know about you, but if you look at what the other guy has to say, far and away a better deal. Like far and away, it's a Solomon concept. The two women, where the one woman came and had a dead baby, or they both had a dead baby, and one of them said the living baby's mine, and the other one said the living baby's mine. He said, "All right, cut the living baby in half, and whoever you can both have half." And the real mom went, "No, no, no, you can have her." And the fake mom, who was just trying to get the real mom's baby, said, "Yeah, go ahead. That sounds a great idea." And so it's the same game where we have to be Solomon and judge the real mother from the false mother, or in this instance, the father, the father who actually made us, who wants us to live, and is giving us blessing and saying, you know what, even when you do everything I tell you not to do, I'm going to make it work to your benefit as soon as you come back to me. And then the other one is just looking for us to die. From dust we came, and from dust we return. And the serpent is trying to bring us back to dust because he has to eat dust. We have to die for him to live. So there's one that wants us to live, there's one that wants us to die. And it's up to us which one we listen to. Again, it's Machlon and Kilian versus Boaz. It's the same story over and over and over. The first Adam and the second Adam. And so anyway, the sole of your foot. I'm sorry, I got on a wild goose chase there. But to prove this point again, why do you think God told Moses to take the sandals off of his feet when he went to the burning bush? Because Moses, I got words all over the place. Because Moaz was under the blessing and under the inheritance of Abraham, where every place that his sandal touched was his. And God said, "This is my land. Where you're standing right now is holy ground. You can't claim it. I've already claimed it." So he's giving him everything except what God claimed. And that's why the priests would minister barefoot in the temple, because it was a physical representation of their understanding that that was God's land that they weren't trying to inherit. They were trying to draw other people to that land and show them the blessing. So Moses wasn't claiming what God had already claimed. He was claiming everything else that God told him to. Same thing. And later I'll get into the verses that refer to the end times prophecies of where your sandals tread I'll give to you, but you can look it up for yourselves as well. That reoccurring cyclical concept of Abraham was given the promise, and then Israel was given the promise, and then final like resurging Ezekiel 37 Israel is also given that promise, and we just walk through Babylon and claim the whole thing. We just have to be in covenant for it. So we're given tremendous power if we understand how these principles work, and that's the whole concept. We have to understand the new covenant. We have to understand the terms of it in order to ask for it, and that's what the book of Ruth is all about, especially here. So um, this after my Asherah and Baal study, when he says, "Blessed are you for not following after young men, neither poor or rich," this blasted me because if Yeshua is the first and the last, and he was there at creation, any god that was made after him is a young man. Any deity that was created in succession to Yeshua, to copy Yeshua, to mock Yeshua, is a younger man. And even if they're rich, it's still a younger man. And Boaz is this older man who's just out there working his field, just building his kingdom and waiting for a wife to come who's worthy, who's actually clean and pure, and comes in his timeline. When you're working a field, you don't want some woman to come up to you and be like, "Hey guy, like you got work to do." She is waited until the harvest is done and it is complete and he's happy to go, "Hey, by the way, I like you." To put it simply. But uncovering his feet there, that is a direct reference to the inheritance of land. And I can prove that again by um, the next chapter. I'll get to the next chapter to prove that. But she uncovers his feet and lays down. And the fact that he knew exactly what she was asking for, spread your garment over me, for you're a near kinsman. So she's uncovered his feet, and she's asked him to perform the duty of a near kinsman. So, um, and then this is a prophecy about the end times. He said, "You are blessed by Yah, my daughter. You have shown more kindness in the latter days." That translation sucks right there. In the latter days than at the beginning, because you did not follow young men, whether poor or rich. So what was Israel cast out for? They followed the younger gods. In the latter days, we don't follow the younger gods anymore. We go back to him. Um, Hosea 2:16. In that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband, or Ishi. You will no longer call me my master, which is my Baal. Go figure. So Hosea 2, the whole book of Hosea is literally him chasing his wife through the temple of Baal. And Hosea keeps going, "Come back to me. I'll bless you. I'll take care of you." And she just wants Baal. She just wants all the prostitutes and all the orgies and all of the fun stuff. And this passage says, "In that day, at the end of days, when I take you back, you won't call me Baal anymore. You'll call me my husband." So, I have heard the argument many, many times, and I actually, until I understood what was going on here, I actually kind of subscribes to it, where people say that they think Boaz probably slept with Ruth in this phase. And now that I read this with this contextual understanding, there's no way that's what happened in this passage. Because we know that Boaz was a righteous man, and when she approaches him and offers herself to him, he says, "It is true that I am a near kinsman. However, there is a kinsman nearer than I. Stay tonight. In the morning, if he will perform the part for a kinsman, then good. Let him do the kinsman duty. But if he will not do the duty of a kinsman for you, then I will do the duty of a kinsman. As Yah lives, lie down until the morning." So he would not have slept with her and then gone to the gate and offered her to the next or the first man in line. He went, "Yeah, I have a right to claim you, but someone else has a right first, so pause. I'll figure it out tomorrow and then we'll see what happens." And so this again is a righteous act where he goes, "I understand what you're asking for. I want to give it to you, but first I have to check and set the parameters and make sure we do this in a righteous way." And where were they going? So she rose in the morning, and he filled her mantle with 6 measures of barley. I haven't done digging on this specific reference, but I know again that's super prophetic. Like, if any of you have any ideas on it, hit me up. Throw a comment up there. By the way, sorry I haven't been able to get to people's comments lately. I've been seeing them, but because we're so busy and so crazy trying to move and get everything figured out, I haven't been able to reply. But um, you guys are super encouraging, so thank you so much for commenting and giving me feedback. It's incredibly helpful and gives me the motivation to get this out there and keep throwing what I'm seeing. So um, obviously, my buddy Scott would immediately be like, "Oh, 6 measures of barley. That's the number of man." So, um, 6. He would probably have 17 ways to run with this, but I don't at the moment. So, maybe I'll have to have him on here one of these days. Anyway, so Naomi goes, "He will not rest until he has settled this today." So again, we're about to see how this is a fight between Yeshua and Satan. This deal right here is this other kinsman is the serpent, and I'll show you why. It's really cool. So Boaz goes to the gate and he finds the kinsman, doesn't give him his name, the nearest redeemer. And it also shows us, this is also important, the reason that Boaz never approached Ruth for the kinsman redeemer is probably one, because it wasn't his right. It was the woman's right to come and ask for it if she so desired, but it wasn't a command. But also there was another man who had the right before him. So he couldn't come and approach her and invoke that covenant. He had to wait for her to come to him. And in that sense, the church also has to understand the covenant and understand what we're asking for and actually come to Yeshua and ask him, because specifically there's another who has a closer right of redemption, and that's the serpent. Until we separate ourselves from this family of death and the and paganism, he has the closest um, familial bond. And Yeshua is next in line waiting for us to step over that um, dead man and ask for him to spread his cloak over us. And this is proven out by this passage. It's really cool. Watch how this plays out. So He says to the near kinsman, Naomi, who has come back out of the country of Moab or Sifting, or who is your father, is selling her land, which was our brother Elimelech's. So she's selling her inheritance. And again, this is important because in Leviticus 25, in the Jubilee year, everyone returns to their own family property. That's every 50 years. So if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. According to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall buy from your neighbor. So essentially, the value of the land is determined partially by what the land can produce, but also by how far away the next Jubilee year is. So essentially, you're buying a certain amount of crops out of that land, and then it goes back to the family. So if the family is struggling, they can sell that land for, if you're 30 years from the Jubilee, you sell it up for 30 years, you get the money, and that land is owned by whoever you sold it to for 30 years until the Jubilee, and then it goes back to whoever is in charge of that family. And that's how that plays out every single time. And this again goes into the end times resurgence of Israel and how God gives us our inheritance, but also loots the nations who didn't pay this fee on the land. Um, I'll get into that in another video because that stuff gets really cool when you start to understand how these laws work and how um, God is using interest against the nations for us, and all we have to do is activate the covenant, and it's all in our favor. So according to the length of years, you shall increase its price, and according to the shortness of the years, you shall diminish its price. For he is selling the number of the crops to you. You shall not wrong one another. He keeps going, don't screw each other over. You know how much that land is worth. You know how many years until the Jubilee years. Stop screwing it up. Fear your God, for I am Yah, your Elohim. And if you do this, you'll dwell in the land in safety. The land will yield its fruit. You shall eat your fill and dwell in safety. Um, where? Okay, so 7 Sabbaths, this is where it talks about you shall make the 50th year holy, proclaim liberty throughout the land. This is what Yeshua was talking about, and he's reading Isaiah 56. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. The Jubilee, like he came to proclaim the Jubilee. He came to set his people free, to give their land back, and they didn't accept at that time. He offered it to them, and the book of Zechariah is referencing that prophecy where he says, I'm going to come back to my people. I'm going to offer them my services as shepherd, and they're going to kill me for it. So because of that, I'm going to sell them to whoever they sell me to, which is Rome. And my hands are clean. Like he washes his hands of it just like Pilate washed his hands of it. So Yeshua was sold by us when he came, proclaiming that Jubilee, proclaiming that year of freedom. We killed him because he tried to shepherd us. And he goes, if you deem me worthy, throw me my money. Like, but I'm done. I'm breaking that staff. We'll get into Zechariah later. Um, but essentially, according to the length of years, um, on that 50th year will be a jubilee. In that jubilee, everyone goes back to their inheritance land. Debts are canceled, slaves are set free. Everything is a reset, the great reset. And I will prove to you biblically why the great reset is actually the best thing that has ever happened to any of you, any of us. These people up in their ivory towers think it's for them. No, it's God's plan, and it's working for us. So all we have to do is step into the covenant and step into the ark. And it's unbelievable how this all plays out. Like, God is a. I can't even put words to the unfathomable intellect behind who wrote these laws and how Satan thinks that he's smart enough to to out loophole the god of loopholes. Like, it's laughable. It's actually hilarious. Um, but anyway, how this stuff starts playing out is so cool. Um, if your brother becomes poor and sells his possessions, his kinsman who is next to him shall come and redeem that which his brother has sold. Um, let's see. That pretty much hits the basics. You guys can come and read the chapter. Um, but it goes into the basics of the return of the land, how that inheritance is meant to play out, and why it's so important to have a bloodline carried forward. So, what is being asked for in Ruth chapter 4 here is um, the land, the sale of the land goes along with the sale of the person. And this is really, really, really deep because think about the story of Joseph. Joseph was sold to Egypt by his brothers. And what they didn't realize was because they took money for Joseph, they were also selling the inheritance of Joseph along with him, which is why Jacob was legally bound to give him a double portion. Because Joseph was sold into slavery, but the great part, again, proving this is when you're wronged, Yeshua proves this again, and we'll actually see how this plays out on his behalf. But when Joseph was wronged, not only did he get a double inheritance from Jacob, but he also got all of the inheritance of Egypt as well, because Egypt was the one that wrongfully bought him. So Egypt shouldn't have bought him, and all of Egypt went to him, and then Joseph shouldn't have been sold, and so part of the other 12 brothers' inheritance also went to him. So Joseph is left with a big old pot in the middle, and everyone else is crying. Same thing happens with Yeshua, and the same thing happens here. So um, Boaz points out the way this law works: if you sell the land, and he plays it coyly. He goes, Naomi's selling her land. Do you want it or not? And the guy goes, yeah, absolutely. I definitely want it. And he goes, okay, well, there's one more point of contention here you might want to consider. Um, on the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead man, who is Israel, who is Ephraim, the dry bones, Ezekiel 37, the the dead corpse of Israel, because Israel as a nation as it stands right now, that's not the prophetic Israel we're talking about. Like it's a shell of it, and it has some of it in it, but that is not the vibrant 12 tribes that are going to be coming back. That is it's a precursor to what's happening. But when we come to life in our covenant, it's not going to look like Israel, where we're sharing the Temple Mount and we're sitting there beholden to the UN and begging for the right to exist. It's going to look a whole lot different. So this is where it proves that this is Satan here, because he goes, you buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead man. She has no offspring, no children who can bear the name of the dead man. This is the stump of Jesse. This is the tree that was cut down from Nebuchadnezzar. Like it all intertwines into one like unbelievable tapestry when this all comes together. To raise up the name of the dead man on his inheritance. I could do like 3 videos on this. I'm trying to figure out which way to take this in my brain right now. Um, so the whole point of this is to keep the inheritance of Elimelech's family progressing forward. And if this guy buys the land from Naomi, he's legally responsible to not just take the land, but to also provide an heir for Naomi. And he goes, I can't redeem it for myself, or I will endanger my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Okay, Satan killed Yeshua, right? And he killed Israel, right? So when this contract is invoked, he needs us to not know this contract exists because this contract is exactly how Yeshua, Jesus, gets all of the land and all of the people and all of the ownership of us back by saying, okay, so yeah, you got everyone's inheritance, but are you willing to provide an heir in my name? And we know that if Satan provided an heir for Yeshua, then that heir is going to supplant Satan. He can't do it. Like mankind cannot you guys probably already understand what I'm trying to say, but because I don't have any feedback, I'm rambling. So, apologize for just going all over the place, and like I said, how wild this is, but I do fully plan on, after I get this out, parsing it together. My wife is really good at lining things up, so I probably will be doing a more clean cut version of this presentation in the future and taking the major points that I made in this and putting it into something for you OCD people. Until then, again, I apologize. But so he says, take my right of redemption for yourself. I cannot redeem it. Adam has the first right of inheritance. When Adam passed on the blame of the sin onto the woman, he passed the right of inheritance onto her. When she passed on the blame to the serpent got the right of inheritance of the world. And all his seed from then forward, from woman's seed from then forward, was predisposed to follow after the serpent. And this is the contract that goes, if you will if you will produce an heir and dedicate your children to this covenant, to Yeshua, to Jesus, and actually raise them up into the inheritance, then the enemy cannot touch it. He's not allowed to touch it. But when we offer our children to Moloch, when we offer our children to Baal, when we offer our children to the system, to the government, to whatever it is you're offering them to, you nullify that covenant between you and God, and the Satan takes it. it all God wants is godly heirs, godly offspring for his people. And the enemy keeps getting us intertwined and intermarried with all these pagan religions and accidentally dedicating our children into um, the wrong contract. And it's because this contract is so well hidden that there's so much confusion to it. Babylon literally means confusion. This isn't something that if you could just read this and it would make sense without having to like study and dig into it, it would have been cut out of the Bible. And God knew this. So he coded it so that you have to study to show yourself approved. You have to study to understand what this contract means and figure out like what the point of it is, because if it's not hidden and wrapped up between layers of enigmas and mysteries, then it would have just been cut out of the whole book, and we would never even have the potential to understand it because the serpent is so conniving and so devious. So this this is just about, at this point, all of us putting our heads together and understanding what this contract means and understanding what this game plan is, because God's laid it out, and the enemy is terrified that we'll walk up to Boaz, uncover his feet, and ask him to inherit us and redeem us. It's really that simple in the grand scheme of things. So to prove again this inheritance concept and the sandals, it was this custom in former time in Israel concerning redeeming and concerning exchanging to confirm all things, that a man would take off his sandal and give it to his neighbor, and this was the way of formalizing transactions in Israel, because all transactions were around land, essentially land and the goods of the land. So the near kinsman said to Boaz, "Buy the land for yourself," and then he took off his sandal. Where is the house of the unsandaled? This one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, this is where it's fun. Um, so my wife actually had a dream. And sorry she couldn't be in this video. She was worn out, but she had a dream before I even really laid out all of the pagan god stuff for her, where we were at this congregation essentially, and we were spitting on all these idols that they had um, set up at the front of this church, and at the very head of all of them was this red like devil, like the typical like the typical animated devil that you all know with like the red face and the horns, and it had a Santa Claus hat on, and we were spitting on these idols and these images, and everyone in the congregation was like ran us out of the church for it because um, they didn't like it. And the spitting on it, like I didn't even realize how significant that was until I started to understand. And my wife has all kinds of dreams like this that have led me down um, biblical like study paths that were when I understand a concept, it comes out as really, really, really potent. Um, but when the man does not want to take his brother's wife um, to raise up that offspring, the the wife is to say, "My husband's brother refuses to raise up to his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. And if he stands and says, 'No, I will not take her,' then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of all the elders, and take his sandal off of his foot and spit in his face. Then she shall answer and say, 'So shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. His name shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his sandal removed,' or the house of the unsandaled." And this is essentially what we're doing in this last day when we spit in the face of these idols. Um, we're disinheriting them. Their sandal is being removed because they will not produce an offspring for the dead brother. So these these demons, these spirits who operate in this realm and get us to marry into this cult ritual of Adam and Eve and marry the dead man. When we step over that and we go to Yeshua and ask him to inherit us, he goes to these spirits and says, "Hey, do you guys want to produce an offspring for me? Because I have someone over here willing to do it." And they naturally have to say no, because if they say yes, then they've already lost. So God has made this contract foolproof where no, if we ask for it, no matter what happens, we can't lose, because if the devil says yes, then the offspring is Israel, and if the devil says no, the offspring is Israel. So God is just waiting on us to understand this contract and ask him for it. It's beautiful. And the house of him whose sandals removed, if he rejects that offer and he will not raise up an offspring for the people, then his inheritance will be removed and given to the house of the one taking the inheritance. It's the Joseph again. He gets the inheritance of Egypt and he gets the inheritance of Israel as well, and he multiplies it. That's Ephraim. Um, so we're spitting on the face of these gods by going back to Yeshua and studying the contract between us and him and what he expects from us as a people. And when we do that, when we spit in their faces and finally say, I'm not married to you, you're dead, that's when their sandal is removed and given to God's people. And then all the people witnessed the transaction. He takes Ruth, um, and she bore a son. Let his name be famous in Israel. He shall be a restorer of life and sustain you in your old age. Naomi took the child, laid him in her bosom, and became nurse to him. The women, her neighbors, gave him a name, saying, so if you remember, his name should be Machlon, because the son is named after the family of the dead husband. But he can't be named Machlon. He can't be weakness because he's the offspring of strength. And so the neighbors named him, saying, a son is born to Naomi. Behold, a child is born. They named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. And I forget what Obed means. Let's look that up really quick. Servant of God. There we go. Boom, bada bing, bada bang. So now that we understand this scroll is the contract, we're talking about the deed to the earth. And we can prove that once we look at Ruth and then we go back to, let's see, is this Jeremiah 32. This is right before Jerusalem is about to get wiped out by Babylon. Um, the king of Babylon is coming in. Jeremiah is in trouble with Zedekiah because he's told Zedekiah, you're about to lose. And Zedekiah is like, no, you're a punk. Um, Paraphrasing, obviously. um, Jeremiah said, Yah's word came to me, saying, behold, Hanamel the son of Shallum your uncle will come to you, saying, I'll let you guys do the research on Hanamel and Shallum. Anathoth? Wait a second. The book of Ruth. Wait a second. Doggone it. Okay. Bethlehem. I think we're talking about the same plot of land here. Do, do, do. Between Michmash, which means secret place. That's one I've been doing some study on lately. That's an interesting concept. Jerusalem in the territory of Benjamin. Let's see. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong on this because I've got a couple wires crossed. I believe Anathoth is. I got too many tabs open. Um, I'm like 99% sure Anathoth or Anatote and Bethlehem are fairly synonymous. So this plot of land is in Bethlehem, And in Jeremiah 32, um, his nephew asks him to buy his field, which is in Anathoth, for the right of redemption is yours to buy it. Again, like we're getting into some pretty deep prophetic concepts here. He goes, um, so his uncle came to him, buy the land which is in the land of Benjamin, for the right of inheritance is yours. So this is how he knew it was God's word. He bought the field, weighed him the money, 17 shekels of silver, and I'm going to get into that probably in the next videos. This 17 shekels of silver is huge, and this is where these concepts actually start drawing into modern day, like right now. Um, it's really tempting to think a lot of this stuff was for way back when or way in the future, but this is all coming to a head and converging on like right now. Like it's like 11:59 and 59 seconds. We're almost at midnight and most of us are still asleep. But I'll get into that, the how these end times prophecies and concepts are starting to point everywhere. It's you won't be able to look at the world the same. Um, but anyway, he weighed over the money for that piece of property for 17 shekels of silver, and this also correlates to Ezekiel, who bought the potter's field. Um, cannot remember how much he bought the potter's field for, but Joseph was bought for 20 shekels of silver, and Yeshua was bought for 30 shekels of silver. And where did Judas end up killing himself? In the potter's field. And they ended up calling it the field of blood after that. He signed the deed, sealed it, called witnesses, weighed the money and the balances to him. So he took the deed of purchase, both that which was sealed, containing the terms and conditions, and that which was open. So there were two deeds. There was the one deed that was sealed, and there's one deed that was open to look at. And um, this is what's referenced here in Revelation chapter 5. It's sealed with 7 seals. Um, it can't be opened except by the Lamb. No one could even look inside it. No one can open the seals. Nobody can see what's in that deed. Wrong chapter. But what was in that deed is this plot of land. It's referencing the sale of the earth, going back to the Garden of Eden. Um, Weighed him the money, took him the deed of purchase. I delivered the deed to Baruch. Baruch means blessing. Okay, so I'm not going to go into everyone's names in this passage because I honestly haven't figured out how to interpret the way the names line up. If you guys see anything, hit me up because I'm interested in other alternative views on this. There's so many names at play. Um, anyway, but he delivers the deed of purchase to Baruch with witnesses who signed the deed of the purchase, just like Job or Boaz. I don't even know why Job came out of my mouth. um, Again, in the court of the guard, so at the city gate. The Lord God says, take these deeds, this deed of purchase which is sealed, and this deed which is open, and put them in an earthen vessel that they may last many days. This again is prophesying for the end of days. A earthen vessel is referring to a clay vessel, a man, that they may last many days. This deed was put in Yeshua. He is the earthen vessel that the deed to the earth and the lost birthright is hidden within, that they may last until the end of days. Houses and fields and vineyards will yet again be bought in this land. So this is again um, the Temple Mount. and I won't go into the verses on this because I could go way too long. The Temple Mount was bought by David in this exact same manner. Um, he there was a plague being going through Israel because of a sin that David had committed, and he was trying to stop the plague. And he was told, offer so and so sacrifices at this threshing floor, and the plague will be stopped. So he went to the Jebusite that owned it and said, let me buy this land and perform a sacrifice. And the Jebusite, I forget his name off the top of my head, tried to give it to him. And David said, no, I am not going to take it for free. It's not a sacrifice unless I lose something. They argued about it for a little bit. He ended up insisting, just like Abraham did with the cave at Machpelah, going, no, I need a contract on this sale where there's blood in it, where I know that your family is signing it over to my family, and this is going to be something that it is ours. So that deed was also the deed to the Temple Mount, which was a threshing floor, which goes back to the book of Ruth. It's all cyclical. It all goes back to this harvest concept. This oh man. So anyway, David had to buy that piece of property. What's happening here is Babylon is about to wipe out Jerusalem, and God is telling Jeremiah to make a contract and sell this plot of land and hide the deeds so that after Babylon comes through and wipes everything out, at the right time when God goes, oh, by the way, I have the deed, the last legal sale of this piece of property is owned by this person, and I can prove it. And that seal is opened, and it shows who owns what. And if the deeds don't match, if they don't line up, then someone has fudged some numbers and the blockchain's jacked up. Um, yes, I did hit you with some blockchain madness, and there will be more of that to come. But essentially, this thread goes through the whole stinking Bible. It's he hides the deed into eternity, into the future, for whenever the owner of the deed extracts it and claims it. And the owner of the deed doesn't claim it until the wife of the dead husband comes and asks for redemption. So he doesn't claim the physical deed to the physical land until the physical bride of the physical dead husband comes back and leaves the physical religions that they were worshiping and ask him to redeem them. It's like blaringly simple once you understand the code here. And I challenge you to take that concept and dig into it and tear it to pieces, and I bet you guys will get more with that than I have, because I've only been able to get that far, and I think that once you get that concept, it can spread in a million different directions. It'll come out in every single book. Book of Esther, for instance. She put on what the king liked. That's the white linen robes that the saints are given. It goes everywhere. Um, but I could ramble all night, so I'm going to tie this up. Um, Sorry, I'm looking at a couple notes just to make sure I've touched some of my major concepts. So again, not only is this something we have to consciously accept, but we have to do it in the right time, in the right day, in the right hour, and with the right spirit. It has to be a humble request versus a like the church likes to preach that we can boldly go into the throne room, which is true. It is true in theory, But in the same way, Esther didn't just barge into the throne room. She again fasted and prayed and cleansed herself and racked her brain and finally realized if she didn't go into the throne room, the enemy was going to devour her and her entire people. So she had to figure out how to go into the throne room without making the king want to kill her. And that's what we have to do. We have to boldly and humbly go into the throne room and look for the contract that Yeshua is offering us and accept it. If you go through every the biblical histories, every generation has a king that leads them in a reiteration of the contract, of the covenant, of the Torah, and every single one says, "Yes, we will do it. We will do it. We will do it." And then as soon as the guy who led them in that contract dies, they all go back into the pagan religions. The pagan religions. It's every single time without fail. And that's why in this last generation, we each have to do it individually. We each have to look at the contract. We have to look at what the principles are. We have to understand what the stakes are. We have to understand who it's made for and who it's made by. And we have to physically meet Yeshua, or I guess spiritually meet Yeshua, on his feast day. And individually, it's going to be different, but it's going to look different for all of us, but ultimately we all have to individually lead our families in this reiteration of the contract, and that's the resurrection of Israel. That's when the Spirit is given back. And that's when Jeremiah 31 through 34 comes, or the whole chapter really. Um, but it's just lining up why we are where we are. Refrain your eyes from weeping. Um, Your work will be rewarded. They will come again from the land of the enemy. There is hope for your latter days, says the Lord. Your children will come again to their own territory. I have surely heard Ephraim grieving. You have chastised me, and I was chastised as an untrained calf. Turn me, and I will be turned, for you are Yah my Elohim. Surely after that I was turned. I repented. After that I was instructed. I struck my thigh. The thigh was the muscle that Jacob had popped out a joint because he was wrestling with Yeshua. So he's that's a symbol of his stubbornness and his strength, and he's striking it like. Um, anyway, I was ashamed, confounded, because I bore the reproach of my youth. Is Ephraim my dear son? Is he a darling child? For as often as I speak against him, I still earnestly remember him. Therefore my heart yearns for him. I will surely have mercy on him, says the Lord. Set up road signs, make guideposts, set your heart toward the highway. And this highway is what I'm going to dig into in the next couple of videos. What is the highway? Because it does turn in, this is a spiritual path that finds a physical avenue. And as we dig into the spiritual concepts and understand what this contract means, it leads us down a physical path that will absolutely knock your socks off. Um, Go by the way from which you went. Turn again, virgin of Israel. Turn again to these your cities. How long will you go here and there, you backsliding daughter? For Yah has created a new thing in the earth. A woman will encompass a man. I will reverse their captivity, says the Lord. Bless your habitation of righteousness, mountain of holiness. Judah and all its cities will dwell together, the farmers and those who go about in flocks. For I have satiated the weary soul, and I have replenished every sorrowful soul. It will happen that like as I have watched over them to pluck up and to break down and to overthrow and to destroy and to afflict, so I will watch over them to build and to plant, says Yah. In those days they will say no more, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. But everyone will die for his own iniquity. Every man who eats sour grapes, his teeth will be set on edge. Behold, the days come, says the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand, to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which covenant of mine they broke, although I was a husband to them, says the Lord. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts, and I will write it in their hearts. I will be their Elohim, and they will be my people. And they will no longer each teach his neighbor, and every man teach his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they will all know me, from the least to the greatest, says the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. This is just such a cool. Uh, that's not even a apt description. This is an unbelievably powerful story that has been hidden and masked in seemingly humble books about a widow picking up wheat. With that, I will end for the night. Um, and I look forward to hearing you guys' comments and feedback. This has been bugging me to get out for weeks. And you could branch off in a lot of different directions, but this is essentially the next step. The Ezekiel 37 prophecy starts with renouncing the idols, and from there, the nature hates a void. It will draw you to find the truth, the real Father. You reject the false father, you accept the real Father, and you start to follow his shadow. And when you follow his shadow long enough, it'll lead you to his feet. And that's what all of this is about. It's trying to, when you look around and everything is scary and everything is bad, you're looking for the seat or for the feet of the the Father, the feet of Yeshua, and he's the only source of protection at this point. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say, and I will sign off and have a good night.